Do you know the difference between good and evil? Well, hopefully, by the time that I'm done speaking, you won't. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How many of you in the audience are familiar with Thanos? Well, I'm glad to see so many excited Marvel fans here. For those of you who don't know, Thanos is one of the most powerful supervillains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and is clashed with the mighty Avengers. But as a villain, what is his motive? Well, with the population ballooning and natural resources dwindling, Thanos made a seemingly logical but nonetheless heinous suggestion: kill half of all living beings so that the rest possess enough resources to not suffer the evils of overpopulation. Some people believe that Thanos' plan might not have worked out or actually solved the problem. But I think that the more pertinent question, or the more interesting question, is, was his plan ethical? If you could save the universe from imminent doom by snapping your fingers and killing half of all living beings instantly and painlessly, would you do it? Well, from the fantasy land of comics, let's descend into the real world and ask ourselves a few questions. Can we solve our climate change problems by having fewer babies? Should the government have the right to violate our bodily autonomy to enact policy to restrict population growth for the greater good? The world that we inhabit today is no different. Both good and bad are innate properties of our human mind, and the dialogue between the two is constant. So, in the beginning, when I asked you if you knew the difference between good and evil, do you? And if you do you believe that to be necessarily true, objectively, for everybody? Or could it vary from person to person, from culture to culture, from country to country? Well, to further explore this question, let's take the classic example of a train and two train tracks. I want you to imagine that you are standing beside two train tracks, and then suddenly you see an out-of-control train hurtling towards 5 people stuck to the track. You had nothing to do with this scenario, and the 5 people can't escape no matter what. That train is going to kill them. But fortunately, there's a lever beside you. If you pull that lever, the train switches tracks, goes on to a different path, and kills 1 person. The question here is, would you pull the lever? This is the crux of the classic trolley dilemma developed by philosopher Philippa Foot in 1967. For those of you who choose to let the 5 people die and not pull the lever, you are categoricalists. You believe that actions are inherently either moral or immoral, independent of the consequences. What this means is that you make a distinction between actively killing 1 person by pulling the lever, which you view as worse than passively killing or letting 5 people die. The thing is, keeping your moral conscience clean more important than the lives of 5 people. And for those of you who pull the lever to kill 1 man to save the lives of 5, well, you are utilitarians, and 90% of people, when surveyed, chose to do the same. You believe that the end justifies the means, and that a seemingly unethical action can be justified if it is in the interest of a greater good. Your moral decisions seek to maximize well-being, and this seems like a perfectly rational and humane response, doesn't it? 5 lives are more important than 1 after all. But wait, let's change things a bit. Now, I want you to picture this. You're a doctor, and you have 5 patients who all need an urgent organ transplant in order to live. Each one requires 1 organ, and collectively, they require 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, and a heart. In the next room is another patient recovering from a broken leg. But other than this, he is perfectly healthy. And coincidentally, is a perfect match as an organ donor for the other 5 patients. I think some of you are starting to realize where I'm headed with this. Would you kill that healthy patient, harvest his organs to save the lives of the other 5 patients? I know this is an unpleasant thought to think about, but I encourage you to pause and ponder about it. Again, the consequences are the same as the first dilemma, but most people utterly reject the notion of killing the healthy patient to save the other 5. But in all 3 scenarios, Thanos, the train, and the doctor, morally are the same. Yet most people would only be willing to pull the lever but not kill the healthy patient, or, for that matter, half of the universe. And I believe that this is due to the human tendency to change one's moral stance depending on how involved they are in the action, how much guilt they feel, and how much pain is visible, how much pain that they have directly caused by their own hand. And this makes us think about the consequences of an action and consider whether its moral value is solely determined by the outcome. But now, from the human mind and hypotheticals, let's segue into something a lot more realistic and likely to impact us in the coming years. Today, it is difficult to imagine something that is as enthralling and equally terrifying as new technology, machine learning, and AI. And while media and research or papers consistently tout the potential and benefits of this, a lingering question is, what about the ethics? Today, in our day-to-day lives, algorithms are making decisions about military operations, admissions to institutions, shortlists for interviews, access to loans, or when self-driving cars have to calculate the value of a human life. When a self-driving car has to endanger the life of the passenger or crash into a family, what do we program it to do? Usually, when humans encounter the scenario, they are excused on the grounds of self-defense and the fact that that scenario is a very high-pressure, intense situation. But in this case, when the car is being programmed previously by a programmer, what does the programmer do? In this case, would that single line of code be considered homicide? And as we are speaking right now, companies that plan on developing self-driving cars are consulting with philosophers and ethics professors to solve this problem. Teaching morality to machines can be hard because as humans, we can't objectively convey morality in measurable metrics that make it easy for the computer to process. In fact, it is even questionable whether we, as humans, have a sound understanding of morality at all, that we can all agree on. In moral dilemmas, humans tend to rely on gut feelings. Well, my answer is that there is no solution. And like most philosophical thought experiments, it really isn't designed to have one. Rather, it is intended to provoke thought and create an intellectual discourse in which our limitations as moral authorities are recognized, right? And the difficulty in solving moral conundrums is appreciated. This doesn't need to be solved, merely contemplated upon. We as humans do not have an objective scientific system of ethics. And even when strictly using logic and reasoning, such dilemmas still persist and are controversial. Because maybe, just maybe, we don't know how to define good and evil. Perhaps there isn't a definition at all. But I don't necessarily view that as a negative thing. I think this is what precisely makes us unique. What makes us human? The fact that although there seems to be no fundamental basis for following a moral code, our sense of empathy and humanity, human goodwill, affection, warmth, gentleness, care and compassion for his fellow human help us make the world a better place. Thank you.